Okay, so next up, our second talk is John Buzzard, our PACE marketing and multimedia person, and Karen Taylor, instructional designer for PACE. Their title is PACE and Productive Partnerships to Support Scalable Workforce Development, a case study in successful multi-agency collaboration.
Like so many great stories, our story begins with the OSU strategic plan. Specifically, goal number 2, which is to make transformative education accessible for all learners. Now, transformative education is kind of the holy grail of adult learning. You always hope that it happens, but the reality is that it's not always possible in every situation and for every learner. However, we know that there are things that we can do to help foster the opportunity for transformative learning, namely by putting the needs of the learner first, by focusing on their experience, their background, their prior knowledge, and what matters to them.
And so part of our process in professional and continuing education is identifying partners who can help us better understand exactly those learner needs. So today we'd like to tell you about one of those key partnerships with the Oregon Home Care Commission, or OHCC.
OHCC is an agency that provides training and accreditation for professional caregivers. These are personal support workers, home care workers, personal care attendants. This is a workforce of about 40,000 people in the state of Oregon. These workers, who are essential yet often invisible, provide one-on-one assistance for people who need help with their activities of daily living.
So historically, OHCC managed training for these workers through sort of myriad of different systems, as well as some manual processes. And workers, for their part, they actually lacked any easy access, sometimes any access to their own training records. Within the space of a couple of years, though, some factors came together that were creating a serious opportunity for change.
So the first one was that mandates from the state of Oregon required higher levels of training and certification for this workforce, which meant that OHCC would need to significantly scale up their training offerings. Also, collective bargaining agreements from their unionized workforce called for greater transparency and easier access for workers to their own training records. And thirdly, the COVID-19 pandemic forced this agency to pivot away from their traditional reliance on in-person trainings.
So based on a past collaboration that also included our colleagues in the College of Public Health and Human Sciences, OHCC reached out to PACE for help in addressing some of these very challenges. And so for our part, we were going to contribute the kind of things you might expect from professional and continuing education. Robust non-credit training support, including things like custom registration, online learning management, and instructional design. We were ready to cover all those bases, but at the same time, the scale of this effort to ultimately support up to 40,000 workers, we realized this was going to be a little different, maybe a lot different, and on a much bigger scale than the typical project we were involved with.
We realized that the only way to move forward was to work very closely with OHCC to co-create a custom learner-centered experience specifically tailored to the needs of their workforce. In other words, we realized we can't just host their content in our standard OSU systems.
So instead, as Karen said, we sort of started from scratch. We built from the ground up a custom platform branded to OHCC to sort of make that a comfortable environment as more and more of those 40,000 workers would be coming online in the near future. And so we launched that effort formally in August of this year. And just within the space of 2 months, we saw the sort of efficiency for our partners increasing. They were able to scale up in the manner that Karen was describing a minute ago very effectively. Among other things, they were able to offer more training in more accessible formats than they had ever had been able to do before. So as a result of that, within 2 months, we're talking August and September of this year, they saw 4,000 individual enrollments. And that figure, of course, wouldn't mean anything to anyone without some context. So for that comparable period a year ago, that same figure was closer to 2,000. So they nearly doubled enrollments in the space of 1 year. And that pace no pun intended, means that more workers are covering more ground more quickly in terms of progress toward their own certification and career advancement.
Also, for the learner experience, workers now have access to a personalized online certification dashboard, which gives them a full record of their training. It helps them track their progress, and it helps them to be proactive in planning their own professional development.
So all in all, nice, positive progress. But we actually wanted to close on a note that Karen mentioned earlier with regard to transformative education. We mentioned earlier that that obviously requires us being always attuned to the needs of those learners. So we want to actually highlight a moment in time early in our partnership when we weren't so attuned to those needs.
So our partners at OHCC requested that the system issue a certificate for every training event, even a 2-hour webinar. So from our perspective, in our world, that's not the custom practice. We are used to the capital C certificate, where you earn it through many, many hours of rigorous training. And so we asked our partners, like, are these little certificates like really necessary? And they reassured us that yes, those little certificates were very important to some of their learners.
And to drive home that point, they shared the story of one worker, a Somali refugee who had settled in Eastern Oregon and found success as a home care worker and remained consistently dedicated to pursuing additional professional development. That worker was known to print every single one of those certificates for trainings large and small, like Karen described, and scotch tape them to her living room wall. As she explained to an OHCC instructor along the way, her background, her upbringing, it lacked any sort of emphasis on formal education. So for her, it was a matter of pride in her accomplishments and also signaling to her own children the value that she placed on education for them as well. So she was trying to sort of pay it forward in that respect. So we heard story after story just like this about learners who valued those signs of progress and accomplishment, each in their own way and for their own reasons.
So what had seemed to us like a superfluous piece of paper turned out to carry a huge depth of meaning that we just didn't appreciate at the beginning. It seemed like such a little thing to us, but we were humbled to be reminded that even a little piece of paper can play a major role in an educational experience that transforms someone's life. And sometimes those little things mean everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
John and Karen, thank you so much. I think you can hear those themes already emerging of that cultural awareness, cultural relevance, cultural appreciation, and co-creation. So that makes my little extension and engagement heart happy. So let's open it up to questions. Anybody have questions for our speakers?
Are you able to tell how many folks have accessed those trainings since your launch? What's
Yeah, good question. So the 4,000 figure I cited was enrollments, not humans, right? So just to be full disclosure, that was in individual enrollments. I think at this point we've crested about 2,000 so far, and that's really without a big push on the part of the agency. I think what they're still considering is for the first few months here, maybe through the end of the calendar year, we're kind of somewhat in a pilot mode where we still have features to turn on. We're very much not finished with. I would say that this is a partnership that we don't see the end of in the near future,
ongoing.
right? So, yeah, it's ongoing, yeah. So I think, yeah, to answer your question, we've got a long way. If you look at that workforce of 40,000 and say, boy, we see more potential ahead of us than we do behind us, if that makes sense. Yeah, so. Other questions?
And John, the trainings are not just in English, are they?
Oh, man, I was about to ask someone to ask that question. So we heard the language access question from Honolulu a minute ago, and of course I was scribbling a note to myself at that time. So it's a kind of a stepwise plan on the agency's part and as part of our partnership, right, Karen? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so when they offered these trainings mostly in person, they had the materials translated into, I believe, 4 languages other than English. to accommodate the needs of their learners. They have higher than average population of people whose primary language is not English. The nature of the work does not require even a high school diploma. And so it's easy for those folks to succeed and earn a living wage in this type of work. So they were offering these in-person trainings in multiple languages. Now pivoting that to an online solution is a challenge because you can't just offer them here's a translation of the handout that you have gotten in class. No. The entire experience from start to finish needs to be in the language that they are comfortable with, right? So for us, for architects of this system, that means that we don't just have to set up one system. We have to replicate that entire thing in every language that they offer. And it's a huge undertaking, but we are making steps towards providing that service for these learners because we know it is so essential for them.
And at a bare minimum, in the meantime, what we are able to offer through the agency is at least the webinar content itself or in-person training content itself in those 4 alternative languages. And as Karen said, the rest of that ecosystem is a work in progress, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Going once?
We have Spanish, Somali, Russian, and that other one. I'm sorry.
Yes, we can. What's that 4th one? We should
Darn
have
it, you
this
put me on the spot. I don't remember. Yeah.
It'll come to us after we say
Arabic.
Arabic. Exactly.
I knew it was in there somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
John and Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.